Okay, looks like we are live. Looks like we are live. And tonight we are going to be live streaming the first vice presidential debate, the first and only vice presidential debate for this election cycle. And I'm going to be joined by Keisha King and Blanchard Robinson. Um, I just sent them the invite, so they should be uh, joining us any moment now. I don't see any comments yet, so I don't know if we have people who are watching at this very moment. Oh, looks like I just saw one come through. Jesus loves you. Sup, fam? Somebody said, "What's up, Chad?" Thank you for joining us tonight. You could be anywhere else in the YouTube universe, but you're here. So I expect it to be an interesting debate. Who do you all think will win? Who do you all will think will win the debate? Let me put a poll. Let me get a poll going. Let me get a poll going. Who do you all think will win the debate? With some black coffee from Starbucks. And I'm ready to get into this. Let's see here. Let me get a poll going. It was interesting because I think Blanche and hopefully I'm not missing, but I think Blanche last time said he thought that Kamala Harris won the debate between she and Trump, and the reason why he gave Camilla, the W was simply because she understood the assignment, that it was her job to spread propaganda, that it was her job to lie and to gaslight and to project, and she did exactly what she was told to do. So from that perspective, she got the W, whereas Trump missed opportunities to basically rebuff and to expose her for being a liar. So he didn't quite understand the assignment. He was too busy playing defense. But I mean, if, of course, I might be embellishing on what Blanche's position is. So I don't want to misrepresent where he was coming from. And of course, I think he was being a bit facetious with his breakdown of it. But I think Trump held his own quite well in the presidential debate. What do you all think? Let's do a quick poll while we're waiting on Keisha and Blanche. So let's see here. Who will win the debate? And let's go Vance. And let's go Walls. And let's go. Okay, let's see here. All right, so we got a poll going. Looks like we have Keisha here, Keisha in the green room. So, what are you all looking for in tonight's debate? You know, what questions do you hope they'll cover? What are your expectations for Walls? I mean, we know him as this kind of goofy, kind of naive rando who just happened to have stumbled his way into a major political party ticket. That's how at least the memes portray him. But what are your expectations? I know during the last Cutting Through the Culture show on Sunday, Keisha said that she has come to realize that you can never take people for granted. You can never take certain people for granted. You can't write off these people because they're well connected. They have the propaganda machine behind them. They have their handlers who are basically marking their every move before they make a move, marking their every step before they make a step. But I don't know, because the fact is, we've seen her in some of these one-off solo interviews that she's been a part of, and she hasn't been performing so well. I mean, even with the talking points that she has, whenever she does her rallies, it's always the same speech over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. They're always the same talking points. I mean, lately I've been posting these reels, and the opening of the reel is Camilla Harris saying the same thing over and over and over again. Those are very easy to find. All you have to do is type in Camilla Harris, and you have this whole trove of Camilla Harris rallies that she's done within the past 2 weeks. And if you click on, it doesn't matter which one you click on, it's the same exact speech, whether it's in Pennsylvania, whether it's in Illinois, whether it's in Georgia, it doesn't matter. It's the same speech, different location. So you already know what she's going to say before she says it. And it's for that reason that pulling these clips together is actually quite simple. So anyway, it looks like we got Blanche in the green room as well. How are you, Blanche?
What's up, Chad? What's going on?
Good. Nice shirt.
I appreciate
nice
it.
Shirt. We got Quisha in the green room too, but I can't see her. I can't see her camera. So, what are your expectations for tonight's debate, Blanche? By the way, before you answer that question, I was talking to the chat earlier, and I told them, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I don't want to misrepresent what your point was. You said that you thought Camilla Harris won the last debate between she and Trump for the simple fact that she understood the assignment, that her goal was to propagandize, to gaslight, to project, knowing full well that she has the power of the whole mainstream media behind her. Whereas Trump's assignment was to expose her as being a liar, and he didn't do as well in meeting his assignment as she did in meeting her assignment. Am I correct in your analysis of the last debate?
Yeah, yes. And in context, Trump won the debate, but not in this game. This game is a little different because this game, like you said, is about propaganda. It's about deception. It's about all these things. So I think Kamala did her job. She did better than I thought she was going to do. Even though she was lying, she wasn't cackling, she wasn't getting lost in thought. She wasn't, she pretty much stuck to the script. I think Trump had more expectations on his plate, than she did. But at the same time, I just feel like she won based on those standards, not the real standards, not the standards of integrity and what's truthful and factual. But if we're talking about, she didn't make the Democrats look bad in a debate. She didn't.
Yeah. Why do you think it is that, in spite of the fact that we are in the age of social media, which means that there's endless information available to people? Sure, you have information overload. You have people who are super far left on mainstream media. You have people who are truthers on social media. You have people who are just wishy-washy and are posting all kinds of things, some factual, some not factual, on social media. But like, what do you think it says about we the people, we the American people, that is so difficult for so many of us to decipher that which is erroneous versus that which is factual, when it comes to who Camilla Harris is versus who Trump is, or what the nature of American politics is? I know that's a loaded question, but in an age where you have this endless access to information, what does it say about we the people that we're not able to decipher the cap from the truth?
I think even though we're in an information age, to get the right information requires some due diligence. It requires you to search. It requires you to know what you're looking for. Even if you type in something in Google, you have to type it in a certain way to hope to get some desired results. So although we're in an information age, folks would just say Google and they'll just go to with the first thing they see. So to me, this information age still exposes the intellectual laziness of most people. I think politics now is more emotional than it was back then. I think now it's emotional, it's popular, it's all these things. It's like you ever see the drinks like grape, orange drink,
Yeah.
You know, it's an orange, actual orange emblem on the drink, but it's not anything that's of any fruit in the drink. And so I
Mhm.
think that's where we are now, where politics has become the grape drink, or the orange drink, and
Do you
people.
think people really like have such do you really think, I mean, what you're saying, like that people have this kind of casual uh relationship with American politics where they kind of pick a candidate or pick a party, much like picking a drink in a cool case? Um do, that's the
Yeah,
relationship you
and
think most
I'm gonna
Americans
tell you
have?
why, because we haven't really, if you think about it, when have we really seen a consequence from a candidate? Like when has a candidate been elected or not elected, and the American people have really felt the brunt or sting of it?
Mhm.
We've just now seen it in this past 4 years, where we can actually see a difference between when Trump was in office and then when Biden and Kamala is in office. We can see a difference. And
Mhm.
so I think for the most part, because there's no immediate consequence to drinking a soda, it is down the road, like when you're in your 60s, your 70s, your 80s. But for the most part, just getting a soda and drinking, there's no immediate consequence. And I feel
Right.
like politics has been the same way up until now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think now there's going to be consequences that are going to affect everybody immediately. Now, not this, this will take 20 years. No, we're talking
Yeah.
about this may take half a year.
Um so I asked you the question, but then we got kind of sidetracked on some other things. So what are your expectations for tonight's debate?
I think that Vance is going to, again, the standards. The standards are higher for Vance than they are Walz. If Walz can go up there and say his ABCs, he's probably they're gonna say he won a debate. It just is what it is. So, but Vance is going to win. Um, I think convincingly. Um, they're going to prep Waltz, but Waltz is no. Um, but again, if Waltz can chew bubblegum and walk at the same time, they're going to say he won a debate. And it's just a sad reality we're in, Chad. One side has no expectations, the other side has all the expectations. The fact in the last debate, the moderators are arguing with Trump. They're fact checking.
Right.
Like, just think about how insane that is, that two folks are supposed to be neutral are arguing with one of the, like, it's just insane. But at the end of the day, with the help of those two moderators, the media afterwards, I mean, Kamala won only because she didn't slip and fall on a banana peel. I mean, it's just is what it is. It wasn't, how difficult was the job, Chad? I mean,
Right.
just listen, just say these things, give a little black girl stank face, don't cackle. Like, it's just that the bar is so low, Chad. I'm sorry.
Right.
Um, but this
Um,
might be different today, though. I
yeah.
think Walter's not as, I don't know. I think it's gonna be a little different today. He might get
Yeah.
lambasted.
The so I'm not sure if you heard the news. The Jimmy Carter. I know you're always well, you're not always talking about this, but there has been a number of times, occasions on Connected the Culture where you talked about government cheese and basically, when people uh I guess link themselves or hitch themselves to the dole of the government, how you don't get the best quality of food and housing. You get the rations, you get the bare minimum, you get the white government cheese and so on and so forth. Did you hear that Jimmy Carter just turned 100 today?
Jimmy Carter, the former president.
Yeah, he just turned 100 years old today.
Goodness.
He's the one that is responsible for government cheese, right? The He tried to boost the economy by buying a lot of dairy products from farmers, and they had these reserves full of cheese and other dairy products, and they were giving it out to poor people, and it was just a hot mess. So, but anyway, yeah, I think that's Jimmy Carter's thing. So, but yeah, he turned 100 years old today. and Barack Obama and Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were talking about how great of a president he was, and like the man was a reject, quite frankly.
You
But
know, it's crazy because every time somebody mentions him, all I ever hear is peanut farmer. Like I never hear anything he actually did. Like I don't know.
it's funny though because Jimmy Carter, like, okay, yeah, his family must have like may have owned a farm. He may have grown up on a farm, but he's a career politician just like the rest of them.
Mhm.
And he was an activist insofar that he was ideologically driven. Um, and he was just as Marxist as the rest of them. When you look at his approach to the economy, it was a very Marxist approach in the same way that LBJ had a Marxist approach, and I would argue that even George Bush had a Marxist approach when it comes to um, education in particular. The whole "No Child Left Behind."
Right.
That is a from each according to their ability to each according to their need kind of mentality, and the fact that too, I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I know I'm all over the place in what I'm about to say, but when you look at even Trump with his saying on the campaign trail that he wants to maintain and protect Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare. And of course, he's arguing at this from a Republican perspective and saying that, look, you have a lot of illegal immigrants coming over here, and they are getting in on Medicaid and Medicare and Social Security. This should be reserved for Americans alone. And it's like, okay, I mean, it's not exactly a Democrat talking point, but it's still not even a conservative talking point. So, I don't want to nitpick the things I like versus the things that I don't like. He's very clearly the better choice between him and Camilla. But it's interesting to see Jimmy Carter and everyone who came after, and even there's a lot of presidents too, even before Jimmy Carter. There's something about their regime, something about their administrations that are just Marxist in nature. So it's like, I don't know. Like I get it. I get people who say, like, you have to pick a side, you have to make a decision.
Mhm.
And so I get the kind of renouncing of this whole two bird, one stone rhetoric, but at the same time, is there not truth to this when you look at the fact that all these candidates, I mean, even Donald Trump, I think he passed one of the largest omnibus bills in American history, which is for those of you who are watching the chat don't know, an omnibus is basically a all-encompassing kind of votorama where you just pass legislation to fund every aspect of the government and basically give them even more money to do all of these different things that are not, in my opinion, beneficial to the prosperity of our republic. That just makes this kind of socialist administrative state all the more powerful. And so when I look at a conservative president, I see someone who is not yielding or capitulating to threats coming out of Congress, saying like, if you don't pass this bill, then the government will be shut down, and all of these government employees will be out of work, and it will be your fault. A true conservative president will be like, well, I don't believe that you should have labor centralized in the federal government in the first place, and so be it. If the government gets shut down, that's fine. We need to roll back government anyway. That to me would be a based conservative president. But a president, I mean, I don't know. Few Republican presidents have always let me personally down because anytime it comes to a situation where the government's about to shut down, they always capitulate and end up passing legislation or voting for or not voting. Um, what's the opposite of veto? I need to go back to school. Um, Signing legislation that keeps the government open, and they never challenge this administrative state, this kind of Marxist trajectory in which we're moving. I'm grateful for Trump during that one State of the Union address where he said America will never be a socialist country. Like he went in on that speech, but I want to see more than just rhetoric. I want to see I want to see a conservative president genuinely like pushing back against our move towards socialism. I know I said a lot, but looks like we got Quisha back with us. Hey, Quisha.
Hello.
So,
Did you have any response to that before Quisha goes, Chuck? Or I'm sorry, Blanche?
I just want to say, again, what do you think would happen if the government shut down? I guess that'd be my question. What is the fallout from the government shutting down? Let's say for 6 months, or let's say a year.
I don't know that that's ever happened. I don't know that the government being shut down has ever happened before. So I mean, I can make a prediction, but I don't know that my prediction would be accurate. I mean, the fact is, whenever the government passes, whenever Congress passes a law, whenever they pass a bill, what often happens is they create bureaucracies, government agencies, to enforce the law that they just passed. If there isn't any bureaucracy that exists to enforce whatever that legislation is. And so the government is ever expanding after each congressional session as a result of the passing of this legislation. And so if the government were to shut down, then that would mean that there would be no way for all of these bureaucracies to be funded. And so I'm saying from a principle perspective, there's a lot of conservatives who say we should end the administrative state, we should cut back on bureaucracy, we should drain the swamp, but they're always afraid to genuinely shut down the government and thus defund these bureaucracies for fear. But I guess I'm the kind of person who says, like, I think things do need to be shaken up a little bit. You know, I do think we need to shut down the government and kind of let the chips fall where they may, because I do believe that irrespective of all the stupidity that's out there, I mean, I saw a great deal of stupidity just within the past 2 days when I posted a reel about what it takes to start a small business, and people were saying that the tools that I accumulated for the 5 to 6 years before even having the idea to start a business would be considered a startup cost. There's a lot of people who genuinely think this, and they just have no idea how to start a business or how to maintain a business. But that notwithstanding, I do think most American people can survive and can thrive and can do very well without the existence of an overarching government bureaucracy. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that the reason why they wouldn't want it to happen is because, one, they would lose power, and two, the uncertainty. And I think that because, somebody mentioned in the chat, the local government can still function.
Yeah.
So you don't really like them
It's just the
shutting
federal
down.
government that will be shut down, right?
You know what I'm saying? So it doesn't really affect us on the ground level. And so what would be their incentive to keep everything running smoothly is the fact that there has to be some benefit to things working this way. And so your plan, I remember Marjorie Taylor Greene was in a meeting and she said, you know what? She said, we need to just shut all this down. Everybody should lose their job, and we just shut everything down, and we just start from scratch. And like, people are going to say she's crazy, but I understand what she's saying though. She's like, this is like, she can even see it's getting out of hand. Like, where's this going to lead to? So I think that a lot of people in those rooms, on those floors, know that if that happens, they're out of business. And it's just that simple, because technically they're in business because of us. So because we don't demand of these public officials, they pretty much get a free ride. And so their free ride is what we have in this current government. Just like you said, both sides agree with some aspect of socialism. Both sides agree with some aspect of Marxism, communism, and especially globalism. Both sides agree with certain aspects of it.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, so it's only a matter of time before they come together and say, you know what, why don't we just do this and just come, like, I can just see it, just kumbaya, let's come together, and then next thing you know, it's tanks in the street. So yeah.
Right. As Quisha would say, they're playing in our faces. Speaking of Quisha, how are you today, Quisha? How are you this evening?
Oh, it's just 4 days. 4 days? Yes, 4 days.
You're getting ready.
Before I get married. We just got back from Hobby Lobby and Walmart, and where else
All
did
the
we go?
things. All
Sam's
right, Quisha,
Club.
we got about 3 minutes, and Blanchard and I have been yapping it up for the past however so long. So I guess you could take this last 3 minutes to I guess either respond to what he and I were just talking about, or what your expectations for tonight's debate is. Go ahead and have at it.
Okay, so I have to put on my other hat. I agree with Blanche. I think that the beast, the media, the false prophet of the beast, of the media beast, is going to say that Waltz wins. No matter what, he can get up there and say, I'm a communist. He can tell that he can literally say, like, I am a communist, and it doesn't matter because a little communism never hurt anybody. What did he say? A little socialism.
A little socialism.
Yeah, what's a little
When did he say
socialism?
this?
This was before, this was in like another interview before he was picked as VP, I believe. But basically he was like, oh, a little socialism.
How about
never
mass
hurt
graves
anybody.
and people like getting shot in the back of the head? But whatever. Go ahead.
The dude has literally been to China like a bunch of, he loves it. Like him and Bernie, they love the bread lines. They just
They love it.
I was thinking about this. When Kamala Harris, she's like, I'm just joyful. We're just a joyful campaign. They get joy out of other people's suffering. That's why they can go around and say, it's joyful. What do you mean? All the millions of people coming into why aren't you rejoicing? That is joyful. Dang it. It's joyful. And you better smile and laugh and be joyful. Otherwise, you might end up in a bread line. You might end up in a ditch. Okay. That's the kind of joy these people like. And I mean, I'm joking, but I'm very serious. I think these people, you got a massive hurricane, that has devastated, several parts of America. And where is Kamala or Joe? Even if it was for a photo op, they ain't even trying to do it.
Right.
We got 30 seconds.
Yeah, these people are wicked. That's why I think it's hard for Americans, just because of the way our, generally our culture is. It's hard for us to believe that people are actually this wicked in our country. That's reserved for those people over there in the Middle East. Those, that's for that. We don't do that here in America, because typically we don't. But now we have been seeing, because of these people, I've been coming into government and power, this is what they do. And I think they are very happy with what's going on. Obviously, otherwise they could stop it. You don't accidentally let 15 million people into the country. Okay, let's keep it real.
Right.
All right. Well, let's get into it.
Fight for every single vote, and we are ready to continue to build together.
Okay,
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
This is a CBS News special, live from CBS News headquarters in New York. America Decides, the vice presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me. And she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then of course afterwards to help the people people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Senator. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know, and like I said, again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the attorney general of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Langford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary. But the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn now to the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan. So let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it. It would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now, not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom, because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say, look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle class and working class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one, whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
No, that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything, many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the
No,
discrepancy?
just all I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protest went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration, the first round, if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, This is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Okay, so that was the opening of the debate. Let's see here. Let me try to do this. All right. Well, okay. There we go. First thoughts, Quisha.
Whew. Oh, the abortion stuff was hard to hear. He is a bleeping liar. He is a liar. I went and read the bill. It is exactly that. There are no restrictions, not for the mother to change her mind at 9 months, not for the doctor to not terminate that child. This is happening, and it's happening in more states. It's not only happening in Minnesota, it's happening in other states as well. And basically, it's like, so a child has to pay fatally for having a bad father. That's ridiculous. That is not,
Or a bad mother.
it's just unconscionable. And this man is wicked. I'm sorry.
Right. So, or a bad mother, because the overwhelming majority of abortions are a
exactly.
matter of convenience, more so than
Exactly.
like what's the girl's name? Amber something or another. Her last, I
Thurman,
forget her
she
last
died
name.
from having an abortion.
Exactly.
Yes, Amber
But
Thurman,
here's the
she
thing,
died
Quisha.
from having an abortion.
Here's the thing, Quisha. It wasn't a situation where she got knocked up by a guy and then he skipped town. No, he was still in her life. He was still living with her, and it was he who actually paid for the abortion. And it was he also who called 911 when she was found unconscious. And so he was still in her life.
With
It wasn't a
twins.
situation where he walked out.
She was pregnant with
Exactly.
twins too.
And so it was a matter of convenience. I mean, whenever Oprah covered the story during her little Camilla town hall, even Oprah's narration talks about how she was going to nursing school. She was, pursuing her aspirations, and it was for that reason that she decided she wanted an abortion. So that's to say that most abortions, the overwhelming majority of abortions that are done in this country, is a matter of convenience, not a matter of life or death. So
yeah, absolutely. And what my point on this is, it was the abortion that actually killed her. Had she
Correct.
not had one, she
Correct.
would still be alive.
She would still be alive.
Had they actually listened to Republicans and what we were saying, she would still be alive. So this whole narrative around this girl, this young woman, is fake and phony. It was actually the abortion that killed her, not having the abortion. That is so like, how do you even twist your mind to even make that make sense?
Right.
On JD Vance, this is my last little point here. He's doing incredibly well. He's coming off actually very presidential, in my opinion. I'm like, oh, okay. Impressive. I hate his stance on abortion, and he's a little too friendly with walls to me, but I get it. I understand the strategy, but I think he's doing pretty good.
Blanchard, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I got Vance is up 20-0 right now. It's not close. Is it about to come back on? Oh
no, go ahead.
Showing some blinkities. Hold on. Was that the young girl that took the pill?
Mm-hmm. It was.
So those pills, they talked about
Georgia.
Those pills, they talked about how the Biden administration basically cut the regulations surrounding those pills, like stop the testing and all that stuff, because they just didn't want the pills to be out of circulation. So basically, you just cut the testing, and then you just put the pills out there. And now these are the after effects of it. She died from it, but nobody wants to talk about that.
All right, so we're back.
Welcome back to the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the vice president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising? And what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment, but Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in.
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local. Many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. I think it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill, but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is—
So you think the individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying healthcare once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret.
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret.
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. We stay in their employers. We get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue. Those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare, because look, it is unacceptable. And, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families, cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the childcare shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the childcare shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide childcare options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state Capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence, and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this, I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
Wow. Did they agree on too much? What do y'all think?
Yeah, they did. Because first it was 3-on-1. Now it's 4-on-1 because Vance went against himself. I'm not agreeing with nothing they're talking about. I'm not shaking my head in agreement. I'm not nodding, nothing. I disagree vehemently with everything that Tim Walz is saying. As soon as he brought
Is this a strategy though? Is this a strategy though, Blanche? I mean, the fact is
It is to not seem to be the good guy, to not make it personal. He's not like, it's a strategy. It's just, I'm not the guy.
Yeah, I mean, it appears as if the target audience, as far as the Trump campaign is concerned, is the fence sitters, the so-called the independents, if you will. Which that word has always confused me. Independent, because traditionally the word independent means that you are not dependent on any political party, that you're not dependent on any government programs or what have you. But many so-called independents, they are dependent on a lot of these. Anyway, I know people who don't subscribe to either the Republican Party or the Democrat Party yet, and still a lot of them are they do benefit from certain government programs and political policies and things of this nature. So I don't know that independent is the right word, although that's the accepted word. I think it's more the case that they are nonpartisan. So it seems to me that that is who the Trump campaign has in mind, and it's the reason why Vance is basically nodding in agreement to a lot of things, saying we agree on this, that, and the third, and not really willing to go as hard on things that he should be going hard on. So I don't know. What do y'all think?
I mean, there is a lot of people who want the fighting to stop. Like I think a lot of people just make everything stop. Like, just make everything okay again. And they see, just like a kumbayaing is a way to bring everything down. It's going to make everything better. What those people don't understand is that you ain't fighting with people who really believe that. Do you really think that the devil, the enemy, the influence that is behind these people is going to wake up and be like, you know what? I think we should come together. I'm not going to enforce my views and thoughts upon you. I'm going to let you exist just, freely and do what you do. No. I say this all the time. We don't understand the enemy that we're fighting. And this is politics. I mean, I think it is strategy. It's strategy, and I get it. And JD Vance tonight is just being very political. I'm not saying that that's a bad or a good thing. I'm just saying, like, as far as a spectator, as a American citizen, it is infuriating, because I know a lot of people don't really understand what we're really fighting against, and they're going to see this, and and hopefully it helps move the needle, and that Republicans win.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we need to really understand what we're fighting against.
What I find to be the most unfortunate is people will say that this debate was more cordial, it was more agreeable, this, that, and the third. But what they will miss is the fact that you have two groomed politicians up there talking. And so, of course, it is. But anyway, let us get back to it.
Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country, and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage. And then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that too has gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
Okay, so that was the vice presidential debate. And we're going to pass it around and give some initial I guess thoughts and some analysis on what we saw. So I'll start. The first thing that stuck out to me when watching this debate was when Tim Walz said that Trump failed to deliver on his promise to build the wall. That's inaccurate and that's misleading. What he forgot to mention is the fact that you had a lot of Democrats in Congress who were stonewalling legislation to build the wall all along. And thank God he was able to build the amount of wall that he did build. And Vance was right. A lot of the policies that Trump implemented to secure the border, Biden rolled back. And then he established Kamala Harris as the border czar to try to figure out what is the cause of this mass migration. So we all saw this happen over the course of the last 4 years. And so please don't have amnesia on this point come November the 5th. The moderators, I mean, I'm still not sure how I feel about their performance tonight. I'm going to have to get back to you on that, but I will commend the moderator who was right to bring up the fact that most Americans actually support mass deportations. She told Tim Walz that, right? And she basically asked him, you know, you're talking about how Trump is wrong for talking about mass deportations, but the majority of Americans actually support mass deportations. What's your response to that? And he gave this kind of response so as to say or to imply that he knows better, that he and Camilla knows better than the majority of American people who actually want mass deportations. Which leads into the other thing, I guess, that I should point out on this particular point, which is that Tim Walz supports this so-called expert class. He believes more in these so-called elitist intellectuals more so than the American people who he wants to represent as vice president of the United States. This is very Edward Bernays-esque. This is very Walter Lippmann-esque. Walter Lippmann, I'll remind you all, he was the presidential and political advisor who wrote a book called Public Opinion. And in this book, he advocates for an elite intellectual class, an elite expert class. He called the masses of American people the bewildered herd. And he said that the bewildered herd has to be led by this intellectual expert class. He didn't believe in democracy, and I don't believe in democracy too, but it's for different reasons than Walter Lippmann advocated for. But he wrote this 1922 book advocating for the masses of people to just stay silent, mind your own business, and allow the intellectuals to lead society. And Vance was right to say, well, since you trust this expert class so much, how about the fact that they misled us into various wars? And how about the fact that they misled us into passing policies that actually were to the detriment of the American public and not to the benefit of the American public? Everything that the so-called public intellectual Noam Chomsky has advocated for, that Congress has implemented, has been an absolute bust. The man is 0 for 10 or 0 for however many when it comes to the public policies that he himself has advocated for, Noam Chomsky. And so when it comes to these so-called experts, in order to go along with what Walter Lippmann believed, in order to go along with what Tim Walz is advocating for, you would have to first and foremost believe that the so-called expert class are omniscient, that they are moral, and that they are independently motivated. They're not independently motivated. They're well funded by government bureaucracy, so they have a vested interest in securing the longevity of government bureaucracy. So they're always going to advocate for policies that favor the expansion of the federal government. These people are not independent. They are bought and paid for. And so they are corruptible. So Walter Lippmann was absolutely wrong. And the vision that he had for America, and Tim Walz and Camilla Harris are wrong for implementing his vision, where they, pat you on the head saying, there, everything will be okay. Just trust me, I got this. And they lead us more and more into depression, into recession, into endless wars, and so on and so forth. So, and then the last thing that I'll point out before I give it back. Well, there's two more things. This one is very brief. He said, I don't talk about my faith much, but, well, the reason you don't talk about your faith much is because you don't have a faith. Not in God, certainly not in God. And then he goes on to quote a verse talking about we should care for the least of these. Whenever Jesus said that, he's talking to his remnant. He's talking to his disciples, how they, in their individual lives, with their individual resources and their individual wherewithal, are supposed to take care or to help those among them who are in need, as the Spirit moves them to do so. That's what he's talking about. He's not talking about the implementation of public policy and legislation by a secular government that wishes to expand itself and is conveniently using scripture and bastardizing scripture and misrepresenting scripture to support its asinine policies. That's not what Jesus was talking about. And then the very last thing that I wanted to point it out was when he said concerning abortion that people should mind their own business, right? Mind your own business. Well, to say such a thing negates the fact that we're talking about a human life in the womb of a mother. This is a human life that is literally being murdered. That's what we're talking about. And when it comes to that life, Tim Walz says, mind your own business. Now, imagine if we carried that logic to people who are postpartum, right? People who aren't in the womb, but who are walking and breathing here on the earth. And let's say that somebody decided to kill one of those persons. I mean, why is what Tim Walz is saying in terms of mind your own business? Why does that not apply to the walking person?
But it kind of does. I mean, it kind of, they do that, Chad. Like
they do it insofar that it's politically expedient to them. But my point is that yeah, they do it insofar that it's politically expedient for them. But I think even Democrats and leftists would agree that murder is wrong, at least in the basic sense. Now
I know
they might pick and choose who they apply it to and for what reason they apply it to. For example, if an illegal immigrant kills an American citizen, right, they will dismiss it, or they'll brush over it, or what have you. However, if me, a Christian conservative, were to accidentally run a red light and hit a transvestite, right, then you better believe they'll be coming for me, especially when they search my YouTube and, oh, he did it on purpose. See, he's a conservative and he did it. So again, they'll pick and choose, you know. But anyway, my point remains that at the basic level, they agree that murder is wrong. And so if they're willing to say, mind your own business when it comes to prepartum, why then will they not apply that same logic when it comes to postpartum? The reason is that they are denying the humanity of the child in the womb, and that is sick and that is wicked. With that, I'll give it to you, Quisha.
I don't even really have much else. I think Tim Walz is disturbingly wicked. I don't even want to keep using that same word, but he's disturbingly deceptive. Like somebody who can just like look you in your face and tell you a lie straight face, and just because typically when you're pressed, you will, there's something in you. For Christians, it's the Holy Spirit that just, you want to confess. But, and I would even say for non-Christians, there's something in you when pressed, when you got to look somebody in their eye, that, the truth, it makes you be honest. He don't have that. He's missing that feature. It's bizarre. And that is very troubling. Like there is something that's some, I don't know what that is. That's some other stuff right there. And I think JD Vance, his like last statement, whether you vote for me or them, I'm rooting for you. No, that's not what time I'm on at all, period. Not on that. Don't want to hear that. Didn't like it. And like, it just got increasingly, like the first commercial when I said, yeah, he's being, oh, we have so much in common. By the end, he basically like was all the way over to the left to me. I'm like, I didn't want to hear that. That's all.
So I think that so Vance, before the first commercial break, Vance was whooping destroying Walz. And so, most people don't like to see a massacre. They want to see some. They want to see the person that's winning, show some grace. I understand as a tactic why Walz, it's like playing good cop, bad cop. I understand why he wants to be the quote unquote human side of Trump. If we look at him and Trump as a person, Vance is going to be the more, I guess, the more rational, the more sensible, the more person that's in tune with his heart. Trump is just like this. And I'm giving you the liberal view of how they're viewing him. And so I think they coach Vance to be more receptive to the American people, like, so that the whole Trump ticket isn't like Trump, if that makes sense. I don't know, like when it comes to Walz and Kamala, they're the same. He's just a male version of her. So, but the libtards like that. they like that kind of, female communist, male communist. But I guess the fringe voter wants to see the good cop, bad cop scenario, to where if it's a good cop and bad cop, you don't see both cops as bad. You see both cops working together to get the crime solved with good intentions. Just one may have an abrasive approach. But I'm with you, Quisha. I'm like, I don't care if you're on the ground. I'm gonna stop him until he stops kicking. But there was two things. Chad mentioned that the American people, the majority agree with deportation, and she also said the American people agree with Trump's economy. So there were two things that she said that the American people agree with, and that was the immigrants should be deported, and that the Trump's economy was better than hers or currently. And so those two questions, Walsh didn't answer. In fact, he mentioned if people are watching Trump, and he basically said people believe that because they're watching Trump and they're watching TV, but clearly we know that it's not the case. But I want to say this, though, about the fringe voter. To me, there's no such thing as a fringe voter, because everything surrounding them is liberal media, from the entertainers, the sports figures, the news, the movies. Where would a person who was not a Democrat or Republican get their information from if it wasn't from mainstream media? So even if a person says, I'm independent, I'm neutral, it's not true, because everything around you, including your friends and family, everything is leaning to the left. So this notion that people have an independent thought, they don't. If you talk to the average person, they believe everything that's on TV. And if they don't believe it, they believe what's being said about what's on TV. But I do understand the strategy tonight. I think that Waltz Vance destroyed Waltz. It seemed different the second half, because the moderators started getting involved more, and they started asking questions that they started throwing Waltz more live questions. And then they started if you go back, they started asking Vance tough questions, loaded questions with 1,000 different parts. And then they started softball lobbing Waltz questions. So that's why it seemed like he was losing steam, because he's really having to answer ridiculous questions and go against the moderators. But I do think, again, it was 3-on-1. I think Vance. I think Vance washed Waltz. It wasn't even close. I think Waltz pretty much exposed himself. But people won't see it, but I don't know. He's a liar.
Yeah, I definitely think he won. I think he did well in a political sense. Yes, I do. I think he did well in a political sense.
He's trying to be he's trying to be the bigger person. Like, right. I'm not going to have a personal grudge against Waltz. I'm not going to.
America is.
Yeah.
Like 1995 America debates.
It doesn't matter who you vote for. I'm just happy you came. Like, right. I'd have been like, y'all crazy. Y'all vote for Kamala. You lost your mind. We're gonna lose America. You're gonna lose everything you own. You're gonna be in a camp in 3 years. Yep.
He should have said, yeah, that's right. Remember what Maya Angelou said. If somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Go and watch Kamala's tapes from 1985. Okay, the girl been saying everything back then. She's saying today. And she said her values have not changed. Believe her when she says that, right? Since we want to talk about Maya Angelou.
Yeah, I mean, his closing remarks. Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. And she was a lesbo. But the all of Walls's Maya Angelou, wasn't she? I know she was a slut for a long period of time.
She was loose. She's for the streets.
She was.
But she was a slut. They're trying to dignify it by saying she was a sex worker, but no, she was a whore. But the thing is like his Walls's closing remarks were the most cringiest thing I've ever
Oh
heard
yeah.
on YouTube. He's quoting Taylor Swift and Maya Angelou and like all manner of decadence and degeneracy and chaos. He's doing it with a smile on his face, talking directly to the camera, as if he said that he
Did he
represents a new
give
day.
the
Go ahead.
did
Go
I
ahead.
see him give the like I don't know how to say it without being inappropriate. Did he give the it looked like he made a hand gesture that mimicked a man privately doing things to himself. Like when he I meant to write it down, but I was like, did he? And then he just gave the guy the finger too at the football game, or football game. So I don't know, like I definitely think he made the hand gesture because I think that's the kind of person he is. Like he's like underhanded, you know. He's like, I'm a throw the rock and hide my hand kind of guy. I don't know. He's just
he's a
something about
weirdo. He's a weirdo.
He is,
but
weird.
the left likes that though. You know, the left, like, ironically, the left likes for people to do that because they say that means he's real. You know, that means he's, you know, he's like they like that kind of stuff. They like that, you know, giving somebody the bird and being decadent, all that. It's just that Trump can't do it. The people on the left can do it, you know, but Trump can't do anything.
Somebody say he's in touch with his emotions. But yeah, I mean, so let's see here. Let's go to our. I can't pull it up on the screen for some reason, but so far
I gotta run, y'all. I gotta finish this wedding stuff.
All right.
All right.
But
care,
thank
Quisha.
you guys for the support tonight, and I'll see you on. Oh, not this Sunday. Next time I see you, I'll be married.
Miss Benton, right?
Yes, Mrs. Benton.
Mrs. Benton.
Bye, y'all.
All right.
Bye. Take care. So, I mean, what was I going to say? So, I mean, I believe, and I might be wrong as far as my prediction is concerned, but I believe that a lot of pundits will say, and as well as social media minions will say that this debate compared to the presidential debate with Camilla and Trump was better. For the simple reason that they were more cordial and respectful and they were more substantive. But the reality of it is you're talking about Vance, who's an Ivy League scholar and politician. Him being senator, this isn't the first office that he's held. Very well funded in terms of political donors are concerned. Who, I mean, you can say that his stance on Trump, from going from being anti-Trump to Trump's VP pick, was a simple evolution of thought and belief. But some would say that it's a flip-flop or whatever the case may be. But I would say that it's mere politics. I would say that that's basically what it is. I mean, is Vance believable? Yeah, he's believable. I mean, he seems genuine in what he's saying, and I can't get into his head or his heart. So I personally can't say why the evolution from being a anti-never Trumper to all of a sudden being supportive of Trump and being his VP pick. But I say that to say that he is a groomed politician, as is Tim Walz. So the fact is, when it comes to the 2016 election, and I'm going somewhere, pardon me if it appears that I'm all over the place, but when it comes to the 2016 election, specifically the primaries, the Republican primaries, you had, I think it was 16 individuals who threw their hat in the ring, right? All but 3 of them were politicians. The 3 who were not a politician was Carly Fiorina, who was a business executive who used to work for Hewlett Packard. Who was the other one? Ben Carson, who was a neurosurgeon, author, public speaker. And then you had Donald John Trump, right? These were the only 3 who were not politicians. The difference between Donald Trump and the other two that I mentioned is that the other two, I guess, because I guess I can't put a reason as to why they were different, but the other two still kind of carry themselves in what they thought was the way in which a politician is supposed to carry themselves in terms of their decorum, in terms of starting a campaign website. Here's where I stand on the issues, and da 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 da. And so it was really difficult to distinguish them from other politicians in the same way that you were able to distinguish Trump from the other politicians, because Trump came in as himself. He wasn't willing to play the game. He wasn't willing to go along to get along. He just kind of marched to the beat of his own drum. This was very jarring, and it was a shock to the political system because he was so different from not only the Democrat primary candidates on the other side of the aisle, but from those in the Republican primary as well. And so he was such a shock to the system. And there was a lot of people who quickly got behind Trump. I admit that I was slow in, putting my support behind Trump, but by the end of the Republican primary, I was supporting him. And especially whenever, it came down to the general election between him and Hillary Clinton, I was totally on board with Trump. But my point is, Trump has always been, since he's thrown his hat in the ring in the 2016 election, different than your average typical run-of-the-mill politician. And so naturally, any debate that he partakes in is going to have a different flavor to it, because he's not going to follow your traditional decorum kind of being agreeable rules that have long existed in this country. And I think for most of us Americans, we're used to seeing the kind of debate that we saw tonight, where you have these guys standing up there, and sure, there are a lot of debates where it does get ugly, where you have two groomed politicians up on stage and they are basically taking jabs every chance they get, and it gets ugly sometimes. I get that. However, the element of Trump in a presidential debate, it's just a different flavor, right? Does that mean that it's not substantive? I would say that no, it doesn't mean that. I mean, to me, like, believe it or not, I do think that there was substance in the Kamala Harris Donald Trump debate, at least as it pertains to the things that Trump was saying. I would say that not as a Trump supporter. I say that as somebody who, to the best of my ability, was trying to watch the debate in the most objective way I could possibly muster. But there is a difference, and this is my long roundup, my long scenic route of getting to this climactic point here, is that the difference between a Kamala Harris Trump debate and a Vance Walker debate is, with the latter, you have two groomed politicians, whereas with the former, you have someone who is not a politician debating someone who is a political activist. So those two different flavors of debate. That doesn't necessarily mean that the Vance Walz debate is comparatively more substantive. It just means they're going to look different. But I think most of your political pundits are just going to bypass everything that I just explained and just go off of perspective and ooh and ah over, yeah, these two were more gentlemanly and da 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 da. Some people will even go so far as to say, why are they not at the top of the ticket? But my the thing that I wish to really push across to you all who are listening to the sound of my voice is, don't fall for that. Like, do not fall for that, because just because someone is groomed and can articulate themselves well doesn't magically mean better candidate or better president, because we've long had people who are charming and who can speak well. Think Barack Hussein Obama, right? And look what he did to the country. Just because somebody can articulate themselves and speak well and smile and shake hands and kiss babies and do all the things that traditionally politicians have been groomed to do doesn't magically mean that they are going to be a better president. That's just a point that I wanted to make. You have any response to that, Blanche?
Yes, I agree with you 1,000%. Most people are conditioned to believe that if a person is articulate, not only are they better qualified, but they're also telling the truth. And I would say that most times than not, the person that's extremely articulate is usually the one conveying the lie, because you want to get everybody to believe it. So I agree 1,000%. I think that when you have Trump in any kind of debate, I think there's a level of unpredictability because you don't know what he's going to say. We know pretty much what Vance is going to say, what Walz is going to say, and what Kamala is not going to say. We pretty much know. But when it comes to Trump, you actually don't know what he's going to say. And to me, that level of unpredictability can be seen as good or bad. But I would say it's more good because at least the unpredictability lends more to he's telling you what he really feels versus he's reading from a script. And I think that, yeah, you put the polls up. You know, I think it was a decent debate. It was a good debate. But like you said, it's like all the other debates. When Trump debated Biden and Kamala, you see it like pieces from the debate went viral because it's entertaining, it's shocking, and it's not because of Biden or Kamala Harris, it's because of Trump. Trump makes the debate what it is. Either you're responding to him or he's responding to a question or responding to you. But I will say this, Chad, when I was growing up, all I heard people say was they were tired of politicians. Everybody kept saying, we're tired of politicians. We're tired of career politicians. We're tired of people that can't connect to the average American. We want somebody that's for the people. Like we want somebody from us. And the irony is you get Donald Trump and he's the worst. You say he's the worst thing ever. It's just like you can never satisfy the people.
So people don't know what they want then.
They don't know because you begged for somebody that wasn't a politician. And then when you got them, you crying about tweets. I'm like, but y'all tweet crazy stuff all day. Like
Right.
you all do, like the stuff you all complain about what Trump does, you all do every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep hearing this thing, Chad. Yeah, but it's not president. This is what I just can't. Yeah, it's not presidential. Yeah, a president can't do that. I said, man, y'all have been getting lied to by these folks for the past 100-some years. And then you get somebody who you believe he's at least telling his truth. Whether you agree or not is one thing, but you all agree that he's telling what he believes is true. And your response is you want the polished politician again. You want Barack back in the White House. You want Bill Clinton back in the White House. I don't know. I agree what you said, though, Chad. I agree 1,000%.
Do you believe that, like, so what you just said about, people for a long time have been saying that they are tired of politics as usual. They're tired of politicians. Politicians are snakes. And then they get somebody and all of a sudden they want, order back and they want a return to normalcy. Do you think that this kind of indecision, this kind of aloofness can be explained simply by the old, phrase of the pendulum swinging? Would you say would you say that is a sufficient explanation?
I would say the pendulum, it is swinging. It does swing. But I would say in this case, it's somebody actually pushing it, though. Mm-hmm. Because the media is...
Oh, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
Because the media is the one driving this narrative. The media is telling you that Trump is this and Kamala is this. So this is not a natural pendulum swing. This is very much done by the powers that be. And so I think what is natural, though, in all of this is people's reaction to Donald Trump. Because think about it, Chad, you have to be a person that's not going to believe the media to follow Trump. Like you have to go against Hollywood. You got to go against the celebrity. You have to go against the machine to actually like Trump, because everything the machine's telling you is that he's bad. So we can at least say that the Trump supporter at least does think for themselves a little bit. They do say, you know what, I'm going to choose somebody opposite of what's popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. So we've so far had 103 people participate in the poll that's up on the screen. And sorry those of you who are on IG or watching on Facebook or Twitch, but this poll is just up on YouTube. I'm not sure how to pull a poll up on those other platforms, but so far we have 103 people, and 85% of them said that Vance won, and then coming in second, 10% said that neither won. Where would you lie in this poll, Blanche?
I mean, it's obvious that Vance won. I mean, but to say Waltz won is insanity. Like that's y'all just trolling.
5% said that Walls won. And I'm curious, those of you who said Walls won, to give a again, whether you're on YouTube or any of the other platforms, and I can see all the comments regardless of what platform you're streaming from. If you believe that Walls won, please give me a reason why. Why do you believe Walls won the debate? What did he say that convinced you that he was a victor in this debate, that he got the W, as the kids say? I'm genuinely curious to know. So I guess, Blanche, my question for you is, did you have any expectations? I know I asked you what did you expect tonight earlier in the show. Do you believe that the debate met your expectations?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was going to be this. I mean, I thought Vance would win. I thought Waltz played it smart because he didn't, talk as radical as he normally does. He was very tame and calm tonight, so that kind of helped his case. If he was the normal Waltz, then Vance would have had a field day. He would have just picked him apart. But Waltz was very strategic and always blaming Trump. He kept tying it back to Trump. So he was smart to do that, to keep that on American people's mind that Trump is the cause. But I like at the end of it when Vance said that Kamala Harris has been in office for 1,400 days. And I said, goodness, you think about it, 1,400 days she's been in office. And if you think, you're like, wait a minute, she's been in office 1,400 days and she still doesn't have it right. It's still not fixed. We still got work to do. So that kind of put things in perspective. But what happened in this debate, I expected. I expected Vance to pretty much win. I expected the moderators to get involved. When I saw those two women up there, I said, I know they're going to get involved. They can't help it. But
they should have Larry Elder chime in as a moderator for one of these debates one day.
I think that would be good.
Yeah,
that would be good. But I thought it was entertaining. Not as entertaining as Trump and Kamala. But I'll say this though, Chad. To me, when Donald Trump speaks, and maybe this is something from God, maybe it's something divine, I don't know. When Donald Trump speaks, when he gives a speech, when he gets done, the reaction to what he said, it forces you, if you have any type of brain, to dig into what's being said. You know what I mean? It's almost like you're like, okay, what he said is so off the wall. I have to look into this, or what the media when he's speaking is so polarizing. That could be because of the media. I don't know. It could be because of the media, but I just feel like people did more fact checking after the debate between Trump and Kamala than they will this one. I feel like they actually, and to me, honestly, the fact checking on Kamala Harris worked, because since then they've been on to me, they've been scrambling because social media went on fire proving Trump right. And so I think that when Trump is in a debate, that's the reaction you get. You get an entire movement on social media that's pushing back against the narrative. This one won't be that. There won't be too many viral clips from this. There won't be any fact checking. There won't be anything from this. This won't move the needle at all. In my opinion, it won't move the needle at all. It just made people probably like Vance more.
Yeah.
If anything, it made folks say that Vance was better than what we thought, or that Vance wasn't like Trump. That maybe Trump isn't that bad because he has this guy on his team. You know, to me, that kind of psychology.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I wish our audience, our chat wasn't so based. I wish we had some middle of the roaders.
Well, Nicodemus, and this is what I mean by Nicodemus just said his word, like I said, his words were divinely inspired. I never said his words were divinely inspired. I said that it could be divine, that when he speaks, the reaction to when he's speaking, meaning that not the individual, but when he is in front of a microphone, the reaction to it is something we've never seen before. I'm not saying that Trump is some prophet. I'm just saying that when he gets in front of a microphone, the reaction from not just the media, but the everyday person, it's like a firestorm on social media and also in the media. So,
and that's
again,
undeniable.
I don't know if it's a gift or a curse, but yeah, I never said that he was divinely, his words are divine.
Yeah, that's a misrepresentation of what you said.
Yeah.
And Nicodemus, with all due respect, Trump worship. I don't know if you're referring to what Blanche specifically said, but I know that on this channel we don't really engage in Trump worship. I know I've done my fair share of critiquing Trump. I mean, earlier I just said that he passed one of the largest omnibus bills in this country, and that was actually a mark of shame. That's not something to celebrate at all. So yeah, I mean, we try to keep it. That's the thing. It's like I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I'm quote unquote neutral or anything like that. Everything that I say, I try to the best of my ability to anchor it in my biblical perspective. And so I am biased as far as that's concerned. And to the extent that either Trump or Camilla are at odds with a biblical perspective, I try to call it out if it's pertinent to whatever it is we're talking about at a given time. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. It looks like, I mean, Walls' numbers are going down. So let me, let's try to lock it in at 4%. Let's see here in poll. So yeah, I mean, this debate, like I said, I mean, it's I mean, Vance is I think he's among the best of them when it comes to his ability to basically articulate his points well. He seemed
very well,
cool, calm, and collective. Like collected. Is it collective or collected? The old saying. I mean, yes, there were shots being fired both by the moderators and by Walls, and Vance seemed to take on those shots. He seemed to roll with the punches, unlike what I'm doing right now in terms of trying to articulate what I'm trying to say. But he did roll with the punches quite well, as far as I'm concerned. And I understand that his assignment was to present the Trump ticket to those who are independent, those who are undecided. Try to present the Trump ticket in such a way that defies the prevailing narrative as it's put forth by the mainstream media regarding who Trump is or what Trump will do. You saw Walls, I think, on at least 2 occasions in the debate, bring up Project 2025 and try to lay it at the doorstep of Trump. And, I'm not going to go into how Project 2025 is not Trump's pet project, because I think we've exhausted that point in other shows. But it's a bold-faced lie that Camilla and Walls continue to traffic in, and that many who are in the mainstream media continue to traffic in. And so you saw hyperbole coming from Walls. You saw misrepresentation of facts coming from Walls. And as far as Vance is concerned, to the extent that I took issue with what he was saying, it was more that he was, in a sense, agreeing with certain things that the government should be doing that is actually not in the government's purview, constitutionally speaking. For example, giving families access to childcare is not in the government's purview.
Right.
I would like to have seen Vance say that, but he didn't. He insinuated that it is in the government's purview by virtue of the fact that he said, me and Trump, we want to give families more access or better access to childcare. Well, that's not in your purview. And the fact is, this is the reason, Blanche, why I could never be a politician, why I could never run for office, is because I'm the kind of person who will say the quiet part out loud, which is, if you are a grown functioning adult, your life is your responsibility, right? And to the extent that you fall on hard times, or to the extent that things aren't going your way, there's plenty of programs and organizations and entities that exist in the private sector that you can lean on for help and support. It's not the government's responsibility, especially not the federal government's responsibility, to get engaged in the minutia of how you live your life and how you pay your bills. Like, that's on you. It's unfortunate that the government has stuck its nose in places where it doesn't belong in the first place, to ruin the economy such to the extent where people feel as if the only fix is more government involvement. When it comes to the shipping of jobs to overseas and such and so forth, the reason for that is because of the government planting its nose in the first place where it does not belong. Over regulation, over taxation, trying to referee who gets jobs and who doesn't get jobs and things of this nature. It's because of that jobs are leaving the country and have been leaving the country, have been trending away from the country since the 1960s. When Martin Luther King was marching, talking about, I'm marching for jobs and freedom. Well, like, where are those jobs now that you were marching for, right? Under the behest of A. Philip Randolph, who was trying to unionize Negroes in the South and across the country, trying to basically force the government, first and foremost, to get involved in the economy with government contracts and dictate how many Negroes you hire versus how many whites you hire. Whenever they were marching for jobs and freedom, which is, after all, what the formal name of the March on Washington was in 1963. It wasn't called the March on Washington. It was it was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, trying to vest the federal government with the power to get involved in who gets jobs. And to the extent that the government acquiesced and implemented and imposed itself in the market, a lot of jobs left the country, right? And so now you're trying to get the government involved again, and guess what that will do? Ruin the economy all the more. This is simple mathematics, but why don't people get it? It's a crime shame. It's crying shame or crime shame. I've heard both. I get my idioms messed up sometimes, but it's but again, the fact is, if I were a politician, I would tell people, look, the fact that the government has gotten involved in so much is why we're in this fix to begin with. Take responsibility of your own lives again, right? There's still churches that exist. There's still private, philanthropists and charities that exist in the private sector. And the fact is, if you are down on your luck and you're trying to help, find somebody to give you a hand up, to the extent that you find a charitable organization in the private sector, they are going to be more effective than a government entity or government program. The reason being is because typically government programs are ran by persons who work for the government, who see what they do as a mere job. But the person who makes it a point to go out on their own, start a 501c3 because they care about a specific issue, whether it be poverty, whether it be so-called crisis pregnancies, whether it be whatever the case may be. These are people who are true believers in the cause that they start, and they are going to actually put their all into helping you find the the solution for which you seek. Again, it's a night and day difference between government-run programs, government-run policies versus that which is done in the private sector. And so to the extent that we cut these programs off cold turkey, these government programs, for one, we're saving the taxpayer. And for two, we are revitalizing and refocusing our efforts on the private sector where the help is more meaningful. And not only that, the most important part of this is that you're making personal responsibility great again. And that's what this country needs. But someone who says that will never get elected because people want to be taken care of by their government. And I did hear some of that coming from Vance, unfortunately. And so, yes, he gets my critique too. I'm not throwing it all at Walls, although it's well deserved. But, you know, there's some things that Vance was saying that, in my opinion, reaffirms this notion that the government should be involved in all manner of things. Blanche, I'll give you the last word. Well, I'll give you the last word on this particular topic. Then we'll read all of the supers and then we'll close it out.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to say that I agree with you. And the problem is that, again, the premise is that as human beings, we are not allowed to suffer or come upon hard times. Just because you're suffering in life or coming up on a hard time doesn't mean that it's something wrong. It's part of life. And this notion that nobody is to be without, nobody is to suffer is goes against God's word. And so I think that when you try to alleviate suffering in humanity, what you get is communism. You get somebody saying we're going to fix it for everybody. And that's usually what happens is you end up taking away people's rights. People are, Tim Walsh said, mind your business, but you want the federal government to tell people to get an abortion though. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, and Vance is saying, he kept going back to, I grew up in this, poor, my mother's on drugs and poor and all this stuff. Again, the premise is false, Chad. This notion that if something goes wrong in your life, it's the government's responsibility to fix it is insane. Even if the government tried to fix everybody's problems, there would still be problems because it's just how life is. And I think that what you said was people would do better off getting help from their community and not the government, because you and I know if the government helps you, there are going to be strings attached, and the strings attached are not going to be what you desire. And so I think that even in what's funny, Chad, is that most people don't rely on the government for stuff, but most people are, or at least half the country is voting on the premise of the government helping when they don't even use the government services. Really, people usually work, have their own medical insurance. People usually are independent of the government, but you all are voting for a small segment of the population. You're voting for, think about it, people are voting for 20% of the population or less, might even be 10%. You're putting all your stock in the government helping them, but guess what? You pass these same people up every day. They're in your family, they're in your community, they're your relatives, they're these people. So again, to me, the premise is false. We've been conditioned to believe that it's the government's responsibility. I don't know where that came from. So the children of Israel wanted a king. God was like, y'all don't need a king, but they wanted a king anyway. I don't know if that's just human nature. I don't know, but whatever it is, it's caused the problem. And now we're at the point now where both sides are saying we want the government involved. So, it's getting out of hand.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so let's get into these supers. We got one that came in at 7:19. So this would have been before. Would this have been before? Probably not. No. Would that have been before the debate? I don't know. It says Vance put Walls. Nope. It was during the debate. He says Vance put Walls on the back foot quick. He's smart. Walls fighting off the ropes, taking a beating. Yep, that was definitely before the first commercial break.
Yeah.
Thank you for the super. Really appreciate it. Got one from Heather M. Says this admin prime delivered us to the book of Revelation. Admin prime. delivered us to the book of Revelation.
I think this administration.
Talking about the Biden administration.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heather. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Wax, for gifting 5 super chat. Or I'm sorry, memberships. Thank you. Miss Ree also gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Miss Ree again. Thank you, Chad, Quisha, and Blanche for VP commentary. Glad to be here. Thank you for joining us tonight, Miss Ree. Really appreciate it. Again, Miss Ree, can somebody ask why Wall's been to China 30 times? And they did touch on that. And he straight up lied.
Dude, his answer was hilarious though. Like,
he lies about a lot though. Like he lies about like his service, guns. Like he lies about just a lot of things. Just your typical politician.
I mean, he gave the longest answer. I'm like, he didn't answer the question at all. He even brought up Trump. I'm like, man, what Trump got to do with this?
With you going to, yeah, I wish, Trump would come to China with me.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like, what?
I'm talking about Vintage Goods, $5 super chat. He pulled a Kamala Bear word salad. Kamala, yep, he sure did. I mean, he did that a lot though. He did that a lot. But of course, it's the fact is Kamala is just an awkward individual. Right.
Very awkward.
And I say that to you all as somebody who myself is awkward. Like I'm self-aware to know that I'm a very awkward person. And that's another reason I could never run for public office. But Tim Walz, the difference between him and Camilla is that at least he can kind of flow with it, right? He will give you a word salad, but he will flow with it to where whereas Camilla, she's just so awkward and she takes these pauses and it's just a very odd woman. To where her word salad is more noticeable than Tim Walz. That's my assessment on it. What say you, Blanche?
Yeah, I mean, so Tim Walz, his word salad makes sense. It's just not pertaining to the question.
Mm-hmm.
Like Kamala stuff don't make any sense because she'll get asked a question and her word salad starts going into pasta salad, then a green salad, then fruit salad, then getting their salad tossed. You know what I'm saying? So it's too much.
What a mess. Heather M again, game over. I guess she was referring to one of quite a few times actually whenever JD Vance had some zingers and was able to corner Tim Walz. So there were actually quite a few game over moments that I saw. Miss Ree again says this abortion issue topic is really about destroying God's purpose for family structures beginning with man and woman. I agree 110%. Thank you for the super. Patrina John, super sticker, $5. Thank you. Got one from Vintage Goods again. Vintage Goods Willie says Amber should have swallowed it with a big gulp, talking about the abortion pill.
Yeah.
Or just not take the abortion pill. How about that? How about not taking a pill to flush your baby out of your system? That sounds like a noble idea, at least to me. Heather M. Again, crossings are down because everybody is here.
I liked how he called it. I like how he called it crossings. Like it's made it seem like it was just something that was just so innocent. Like it's a crossing, not an invasion, but they're just crossings are down.
Yeah, they were just walking one day and they just tripped and fell over the border. Right. No, that's not how that happened. Miss Ree again. Miss Ree was coming in clutch tonight. She says when the Walls military I guess she's asking about Walz's military background. When will the questions come about his military background? I'm surprised actually that the question about his military background didn't come up because they did ask about him going to China so many times. They did ask him about, hey, what about the fact that the majority of Americans believe that there should be a mass deportation? So they were asking questions about their stance on certain things and about Walz's and Camilla's stance on certain things, as well as things personally about Walz. And I was surprised the military background was a question that didn't come up because there were a lot of there were a lot of things that Walz has said historically that don't quite add up mathematically, that he definitely should have been called out on, especially on a major debate stage. Heather M. again, she says, my son asked if that's Joe Biden's brother. Talking about Walz. You saw how he tried to low-key make fun of Trump's age?
Oh, yeah. You're talking about 80-year-old Trump.
Yeah. Let's see. Alethea 846, $5 super. She says, thanks for this live stream tonight. God bless y'all. God bless you too.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Super sticker from Everett Randolph, $5. Thank you. Super sticker from DT, $2. Thank you so much. Theological Handyman, $2 super, says Vance started off well, but flatlined when he was agreeing with Walz. I agree with that. I do agree with that, but again, I think it was very strategic. $10 super from Martin Towns. He says, just received an automated message from Walz's Instagram page asking for support. I actually received the same message like a month ago. Yeah, not tonight. I received it like a month ago. Says, I responded, I don't like communism and I hope you both lose for America's sake. Thanks for the show tonight, guys.
Thank you.
So yeah, let me see if I still have that message. See if I can pull it up.
I get some asking to support Kamala.
Oh, do you?
Messages, yeah. I always respond
Because
with
you're a black man in Atlanta.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I know whenever they do these mass outreach promos, they do it based upon demographics. So
and I respond so crazy to them. Oh my goodness.
So let's see here. Share screen. So yeah, these are my message requests, and there he is, right there, Tim Walz.
Wow.
Which, you know, it's not him; it's just robotic. But he says, "Friend, I'm running alongside Kamala Harris to be Vice President of the United States. Our team is running a quick survey to see where you stand. Do you agree that Donald Trump must be defeated at the ballot box?"
Like your whole camp, that's just crazy to me, man. Like it's just lazy politics. Like your whole campaign is
Donald Trump.
That's crazy. Like,
yeah. What a mess. Dan Moses says, I want to thank you, Chad, plus Larry Elder, and plus Blanchard for being instrumental in lifting your voices. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to be here. Mountain Woman, one of our members, she said, I have people in my family who hate Trump so much they would literally vote for Hitler if he came back. That's how brainwashed the media has made people. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, Blanche has talked about this on a number of occasions as it relates to the blacks, where like Satan could literally be running, and if he's running as a Democrat, the blacks will vote for him. And Jesus could be running as a Republican, and if he has an R next to his name, the blacks will vote against him. And it's a crying shame. Got it right this time. I've always heard crime shame when I would visit my black family in Arkansas. The rural Arkansas South, they always say it's a crime shame. And it wasn't until I would come back to my predominantly white Texas suburb where I would hear white folks say crying shame. So
yeah,
I guess it just depends on your region, right? $5 super sticker from Nam Moses. Thank you. Thank you. Mo Coy, $10 super sticker or chat. He says Vance is sus. What does sus mean? Is that like a Zoomer Gen Z word for homosexual?
Yeah, but he's not. He means sus as in can't be trusted. You know.
Okay. Just when I thought I was up on my my Gen Z lingo, Vance is sus. He went from praying to Jesus to praying to Mary and saints, and then Jesus again, to cleaving. This print is so small. To cleaving unto a Hindu. He's sold his children to interfaith already. So he sold out to the DEI, WEF, and WO. No. I mean, anytime people start like using different religions and different faiths interchangeably, that's a sign that they can't be trusted. That they're trying to, like, the fact is, there's only one true God. There's only one name given under heaven by which man can be saved, and that name is Jesus Christ. There is no other way. There is no other way. The guy who started Hinduism is dead and gone. Muhammad, who started Islam, is dead and gone. Joseph Smith, who started Mormonism, is dead and gone. All these people who started these fake and faux demonic religions are dead and gone, but Jesus is still alive, and he sits at the right hand of God. So to use all these interfaith like religions and trying to appeal to the masses of people is blasphemous, as far as I'm concerned. When you're trying to put Jesus alongside some idol. So, but I digress. Got another one. I guess this is the last one from 96 to Life. $5 super sticker says, in my opinion, conservatives are always measuring their candidates up against perfection and then get upset when they fall short of this unrealistic measure. I have mixed thoughts on that. I mean, the fact is, upset, I think, is an interesting word. I don't get upset about that which I expect. I'm hoping that makes sense. I don't expect for a politician to be perfect. I don't expect for Donald Trump to be perfect, or JD Vance, or whatever. To the extent that I have critiques to voice, it's more the case that you have a lot of people who are politicians who are just being outright deceivers, right? And the fact is, I expect for a man in leadership to make mistakes, or to not be perfect, because they are, after all, a man, right? And that is right. I use the word man for a reason. I'm not going to vote for a woman, but I don't care if she's a Republican. But the thing is, while I expect them to not be perfect, if I find out that you're purposefully being deceptive, that, I do critique that, and I go out of my way to critique that. This is why I spend a lot of time critiquing Martin Luther King. And so, to me, when I'm critiquing somebody who's being deceptive, and I'm giving you the receipts as to why they're being deceptive and how I know they're being deceptive, to get the rebuttal from someone saying, "Oh, well, not everybody's going to be perfect," I think that's a disingenuous argument, right?
It is.
Because there's a difference between misspeaking or believing something that's not true, but you genuinely believe it. Like, there's a difference between that and being deliberately deceptive. So, it goes back to what I said earlier about JD Vance. I mean, he's an Ivy League educated scholar and politician, and not only that, he's made his bones in corporate America as well. So he was wealthy before he even got into politics, right? So he's a very well-rounded individual. And so when he says certain things, like, he knows what's in the Constitution and what the government is and is not able to do constitutionally. And so when he's saying things kind of nonchalantly that he knows as well as I know is not in the purview of the federal government, it makes me wonder, is this malice or is it ignorance? And based upon the pedigree of who he is, I don't know that it is mere ignorance. And so, yes, I'm going to critique that. It's not that I expect him to be perfect. I just expect you not to be a liar. Anyway, Blanche, I'll give you the last word before we close it out.
I guess, decent debate. I think Vance won. I don't know if the media is going to be able to say that Waltz won, so they may just go back to attacking Vance, not supporting Trump in the past. Maybe they'll focus on that. I don't think they'll really be able to focus on, Waltz winning. That'd be very difficult to do. But I'm with you on, you know, a mistake versus a choice. If I forget to take the trash out, that's a mistake. But if I cheat on my wife, that's a choice. So I think that when people say that, you know, nobody's perfect, it's very out of context and disingenuous, because we're talking about a person misspeaking, like you said, versus somebody intentionally deceiving the people. And so JD Vance, like you said, he's a politician. He knows what to say. He knows how to say it. He knows how to not answer. He knows how to answer. So he is very polished. I was actually impressed with him. But when I go into his personal life, and I'm not holding him to perfection, I'm just saying, you know, if you mess around with Christ, I'm not going to look at you too favorably. If you go from Christ and then you go to the woman with 8 arms, I'm gonna kind of look at you funny. So, and it's just, I just am. I just don't trust that.
And rightly so.
And so, but he is a politician, and so is Waltz, and that's the game they're in. And Chad, you mentioned about not being a politician, and I would say that it would be beneath you, because you are an honorable man of God and righteous. So I think politics would be beneath you to even do, because I feel like what they would want somebody like you to do is to compromise yourself to make everybody else in the room comfortable, whether they would be Republicans or Democrats. And so I think it'd be beneath you to do it. However, we are in a country that is ran by politics. We do have a government. We do have folks that are going to be elected in positions of power over us. So at the end of the day, we know that our faith is the most important. So who's ever in charge, you don't want somebody in charge who's going to make it difficult for you to worship God. And I think that when we're talking about these things in politics, you got to look at it that way. You don't want somebody to get in office to say that the Bible is homophobic, the Bible is racist, the Bible is dangerous, the Bible is this awful book that incites people to do all these bad things. You don't want them to say that. You don't want them to say that you aren't allowed to, worship God freely. So who's in charge does matter. This is a very important election, as all of them are. But I think now we can see how important it is, because we have this election attached to a global agenda. They just met in New York with the Summit for the Future, Agenda 2030. We have all these things going on globally, and these global things are kind of matching what Democrats and Republicans are talking about. So I think that it's very important that we, pray to God in our decisions on who we're going to vote for and make the right choice. But again, debate was good. I think Vance won. I think they gave Waltz some type of something. Allegedly, they gave him something because he wasn't his normal off-the-wall radical self. But anyway, that's all I have, Chad.
Looks like we got some last-minute supers. One of them is from Nam Moses. Says, have you all ever viewed the website beautifultrouble.org? It's a Marxist activist strategy website. No, I've not. Beautifultrouble.org. I know there's a lot of Marxist websites that are out there. The only Marxist websites that I have visited are ones that are archival. They take archival information and then they put it into a online library. And so I have not heard of that particular one, but I will look it up. Thank you for that.
I'll look it up.
Beautifultrouble.org. And then we got a comment from one of our members. It says, even CNN admitted that Vance won the debate according to the Gateway pundit, but Rachel Maddow and Joyless Reed said otherwise, but no surprise there. I actually am surprised to hear CNN say that Vance won. So I know that they are drooling over Tim Walz, or they have been since Camilla announced him as her VP pick. So
he didn't, but you got to admit, Chad, he didn't look like Walz didn't look good in this debate. Like he wasn't like charming. Like he didn't. I don't know. He didn't look good to me. Like I don't think he gained any fans this debate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You say Walls didn't gain fans.
Yeah, Walls didn't gain any fans this debate. I don't think he looked good this debate. Not as
Right.
far as just like how he was. I don't think he charmed anybody to want to vote for Kamala. I felt like he did the opposite. He seemed kind of creepy. I don't know. It just looking into the camera weird.
Yeah. He looked as confused as Biden in some instances.
He did.
I noticed. I think that's one of the reasons why somebody who commented asked if Walls was Biden's brother, and I can see that. I mean, I understand it's a child.
She said her child asked that.
Yeah, I understand it's a child asking the question, but I can totally see it just with certain, I guess, angles and this kind of look of confusion in the eyes.
Yeah, he looked
during
confused
certain
at times.
instances.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the show. Blanchard, are you going live tomorrow?
Yes, I'll be going live.
What are you going to be talking about?
Part 2 of when the heart is black, the devil is light.
There you go. Well, I'm looking forward to watching it, and do follow Blanche. He is Blanchard on YouTube and also on IG. You can see on the screen there his Cash App if you feel so inclined to throw a little something his way.
Oh, thank you.
Anyway, love you all. God bless. Have a good night.